Once I start, you are able to hear me clearly?
Yes, sir. We are able to hear you clearly.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you very much again for giving me another opportunity to talk to you all. We had an excellent Graha Pravesam session yesterday. We didn't have anything to eat there, but we had food for our ears. And the evening was an excellent session on Kannadasan. So I was a little apprehensive, is it Monday blue again? We start off with a subject like a classification from HSN to GST. But I thought it was a very, very important subject for a number of reasons, which I would probably start off with saying, and thereafter proceed with my presentation. As Prithvi said, I had originally said that probably it will take two sessions. It is not possible to cover such a vast topic like this in 1 hour or 1 hour and 10 minutes. So I have requested him to give me two sessions, maybe about 1 hour or 1 hour 10 minutes each session, so that I will cover the entire gamut of classification of commodities. Now, the importance of the subject, of course, needs no mention. Yesterday also, when we had the session, and day before yesterday, in our chat also WhatsApp group, we are talking about the classification of parathas, whether they are frozen parathas or whether they are fresh parathas. The rate of tax at 18% is really hot. Therefore, what should be the classification of parathas, whether it should be 5% or 18%, is a problem which we are handling today. And the Advanced Ruling Authority has said it will be 18% based on an interpretation of a particular entry, 99A, under notification 1 of 2017. I will come to the GST part of it at the end, because first we need to know what are the principles of classification. And once we know the principles of classification, we see how to apply that to facts of a particular case and what results do we get. I think we can have a lot of discussion on that. I'll now open my presentation. So I have given my topic as the classification of commodities, journey from HSN to GST. Now, all practitioners of indirect taxes, whether it is central excise, whether it is customs, whether it is VAT or its predecessor, the sales tax, or currently the GST, all of them are commodity taxation. And in commodity taxation, the first requirement is to determine the classification of a particular commodity in order to arrive at the rate of tax, which is a very important instrument in taxation. Then, of course, most of these rates are ad valorem rates, so you apply it on a value. So we saw about transaction value in some of the webinars. So you apply both of them to arrive at the actual quantum of tax which is required to be paid. So under central excise, under customs, we have been having a very systematic and scientific method of classification of goods, whereas the same was not true with reference to sales tax and also VAT. The VAT schedules of each state was different. There was no scientific method of trying to determine where a particular goods will fall, and that led to, of course, a lot of litigation. And now with the onset of GST, where we have borrowed all the classification interpretation rules from the customs, we have actually made a complete link from the HSN to the Customs Act and to the GST. Therefore, knowing the principles of classification is a very, very essential one for us going forward in the GST regime. The other thing is also, most of us on the indirect tax side, if you are practicing, and if you are practicing at the tribunal level and also High Court, if you are practicing the tribunal level, then we had a lot of times to issues relating to classification and valuation, we have to address it in the tribunal. But when it comes to High Court, or only those who are practicing the High Court, they did not have that benefit, because all questions relating to rate of duty, which means classification and valuation, were going straight to the Supreme Court. So hardly we could not see anything on classification based on the HSN at the High Court level, even though the VAT appeals and the sales tax appeals involving classification were dealt with by the High Court. Therefore, going forward, for anybody who is going to be involved in commodity taxation, the knowledge of HSN and the interpretative rules of HSN, I think, would go a long way in helping them or assisting them in determining the classification under the GST. And that I thought was the basic premise why I wanted to take up this particular topic and also deal with it in certain detail. Now, HSN, Harmonized System Nomenclature, as all of you know, was developed by the World Customs Organization, which is headquartered in Brussels. And it developed this system from the first in 1986, and we adopted it in the customs tariff from 1986. To start with, our excise tariff was not fully aligned with the HSN, but subsequently that was also fully aligned with the HSN. Therefore, excise as also the customs tariff are fully aligned with the HSN. And the HSN is a body of experts. There is a separate classification division and there is a separate valuation division under the World Customs Organization. And the advantage is more than 150 member countries follow the same HSN classification, with the result that sitting in Chennai, I can assist any client, whether he is in the United States or in European Union or in Thailand, regarding the correct classification of a particular item, because the classification is uniform across all the countries. When I say more than 150, we are talking about 99% of the international trade goes on the basis of common classification system. Therefore, it is also opens an opportunity that you can assist throughout the world with reference to classification, just as you can do with reference to valuation. And the rules of interpretation which are given in the HSN are also incorporated in our Customs Act, which is now borrowed in the GST, which is also the interpretative rules for all jurisdictions, whether it is the United States, Europe, or any country you take, all of them follow. Therefore, HSN is a very, very universal commodity classification system, and it's also very, very scientific, very scientific. Now, with this introduction, I'll just try to explain the basics of HSN and the interpretative rules, which are, we can say, same as the customs tariff. Therefore, in a way, I'll be doing HSN and the customs tariff together in this first session, then take it to the GST in the next session. Now, you see in this slide, the general structure of the HSN is all commodities under the sun are divided into 21 sections. And each section is divided into a number of chapters. What we have, I think somebody has, is my screen visible? Because somebody has said started screen sharing or something.
Sir, the screen sharing is visible, sir. The problem can be at the end of that particular participant only, sir.
No, it has gone out. It has gone out for me. That's why I was wondering. I'm not able to see.
Gone out for you, sir.
Ah, that's yeah. Okay. Are you able to see now?
No, now it is gone for us. Can you read?
Yeah, I'll do that because I'm even now I'm not having it, so I'll just do the screen sharing again. Getting it?
Yes, sir. So can you just make it to full screen mode?
I know, Modi. I'm doing it only now. Yeah.
Yes.
Getting it? Okay. Sorry.
Yes, sir. Fine.
Therefore, I said all the entire HSN is divided into 21 sections, and each section is divided into a number of chapters. There are actually 97 chapters. For whatever reason, chapter 77 was kept blank, and all countries were given a choice to have their own headings 98 and 99. The choice for any country is only with reference to chapter 98, 99. They can have what they want. But in the 97 chapters, nobody has any right to alter those chapters. So, for example, we have chapter 98 in the customs tariff, which talks about the project imports and also certain baggage, etc. So, we don't also have, therefore, we took 98 project import as a special item under 9801. But otherwise, under the HSN, there are 97 chapters with one of them kept blank. And under each chapter, there are what we call as headings, which are at 4 digits. I'm going to take each one of you through each one of these. It will be an interactive session with examples only. I'm broadly defining the HSN. 97 chapters are in turn divided into 1,222 headings, and I put it as 4 digits: 0802, 84, 88, 85, 17. So what we call these are 4 digits. Like this, there are 1,222 headings. And headings are further divided into subheadings, and we have 5,387 subheadings, which I call them at 6 digits. So you will say 85, 17, 62. Therefore, there are 6 digits, and at the 6-digit level, you have 5,387 subheadings, and the HSN stops at the subheading level, which means any commodity under the sun must be fitted into one of these 5,387 subheadings. Obviously, therefore, under each chapter, under each subheading, you will always have the classification others, because it is not possible to define and include each and every commodity under the sun. Therefore, you have the term others also. Under each chapter, under each heading, under each subheading, you may have others also. Therefore, we are talking about all commodities being classified under 5,387. So up to this 6-digit level, from 21 sections, all countries who are members of WCO will follow the same structure. And in addition to all this, under each chapter and each subheading, there are also what we call as explanatory notes given by the committee as to further giving guidance as to what is included or what is not included under any particular heading. So when we are not able to determine anything based on this, and also not able to determine based on the HSN explanatory notes, then of course we have rules for interpretation of this particular HSN or the tariff, by applying which we will have to come to a decision as to what is the classification of particular commodity. Now, beyond 6 digits, countries have been given the choice to have 8 digits and 10 digits. That is mainly for the purpose of collecting statistics, which is of importance to the particular country. So we adopted in 2003 the 8-digit classification. Till then we had only 6 digits. After 2003, we adopted 8 digits. Therefore, we now have 8-digit classification. All that it means is the 8th digit will be a subset of the 6th digit. The entire thing is, if you have a chapter, within chapter, the various headings, within heading, subheadings, subheadings. Therefore, it flows like a funnel down to, therefore, each one will be a subset of the other. That is how we will be determining that. United States, for example, has a 10-digit classification. So depending on the level to which they want to collect statistics of the imports and exports of country, they can have 8-digit or 10-digit, or people can stop at the 10th-digit level also, it is possible. So this is the broad structure of the HSN. And I will also give you one other interesting fact. I have not put it in the slide. Actually, see the arrangement of the section 1 to section 97. Section 1 will start with live animals, and section finally 97 other miscellaneous manufactured products. Then chapter 90 various scientific instruments. Chapter 87 will be vehicles, etc. Chapter 88 will be aircrafts. So you progress from live animals to the highest type of manufactured product. That is how the progress of the sections goes. Within chapters also, when you say a particular classification, if you have classification 3901, 39 chapter is for plastics. So you have 3901 to 3926. If you have so many 4-digit headings, which the headings are there, when you look at the tariff, you will find there is also a progression. 3901 will be what is called the most natural form, and 3926 will be the highly evolved or manufactured form. 3901 to 3914 will be primary forms of plastic. Beyond 3915, etc., you'll start manufactured products, etc., of things. So you'll have plastics, tableware, kitchenware, tubes, pipes, fitting, all manufactured process, growing proceeding. So the way it is structured is also progress from section 1 to section 21. They define a high level of manufacture. Similarly, within the chapter, one heading to the last heading, again, it will show the progression from raw material or from the primitive part to the manufactured part. That is how the entire thing is arranged. And there is a committee, and this committee, of course, nothing is permanent. You have to keep reviewing it. So the HSN committee sits every 6 months in Brussels. All member countries are present. They present the problems like new products coming in for which you cannot determine the classification. So they keep looking at all that and revise every 5 years the HSN. And what we are looking today is the one which is revised as of 1st January 2017. And the next revision is due on the 1st of January 2022. And that is also ready, because the way in which the products are developing, especially in the electronic field or the IT side, is so mind-boggling that they have to constantly update the HSN classification to reflect the progress of science. So the next is due on 2022. We are looking at the 2017 HSN and the corresponding, of course, rules, etc., for the purpose of today determining the classification, how to proceed with the entire structure. So this is broadly the HSN structure. I'm just giving you an example. You don't have to read anything. I'm just giving. For example, section 2. I said 21 sections. I've just given an example of section 2. It's called vegetable products. That section 2 has got chapters 6 to 14. Therefore, 9 chapters are there under that particular section. And you will see chapter 6 is live trees and other plants. And chapter 14 will be vegetable plating materials, vegetable products, etc. So when you're doing Mungil Kuda, we are talking about vegetable plating material. So you go up to that level from the live trees. You start from the trees and you proceed to edible vegetables, edible fruits, coffee, tea, cereals, products of milling industry, oil seeds, lac, vegetable plating material. I'll just give an example of, there is a section 2 on vegetable products which consists of these 9 chapters. So under each chapter, a lot of products are covered. So this is one thing which you wanted to know. Now you look at section 2. When you have a vegetable product, each section may or may not have a section note. In section 2, there is a note which says, in this section, the term pellets means products which have been agglomerated either directly compression or by addition of a binder in a proportion not exceeding 3% by weight. Now, this is very important because when we come to the principles of classification, this section notes, and we are also going to talk about chapter notes, play a very critical role in classification. So in section 2, when you talk about vegetable product, you are making small pellets of a vegetable product. What is the meaning of that they give? It must be simply compressing the item, or you may add a binder like a gum or something to bind. But if the weight of the binder should not exceed 3%. If it exceeds 3%, then it ceases to be falling under section 2. Therefore, whenever you have a vegetable product which has a pellet which is done by a binder, but the binder is 5%, then from section 2 you will know it will not fall within section 2. Then you will have to find for alternate classifications as to where the particular pellet is to be classified. So we talked about section. From section you have number of chapters. A section has a section note, and this is one example of a section note. I'm going to take examples of application of various section notes, chapter notes, headings. Each and every item I'm going to give an example so that you have a feel for the classification. Now comes, we are talking about the chapter. Now this chapter is on edible fruit. Chapter 8 is on edible fruits and nuts, peels of citrus fruit or melon. So it is what is called a simple heading of chapter 8. Now you have what we call a chapter note. So you saw earlier you have a section note. Now within the section you have chapters from 6 to 14, you saw that. Each chapter will have a chapter note as to what is contained in the section or how a particular thing should be classified, what are the rules for classification within the chapter, that comes here. For example, this says this chapter does not cover inedible nuts or fruits. So when you talk about edible fruits and nuts, so it very clearly says it will not cover inedible nuts or fruits. Now, because you say edible fruits and nuts, you have probably say if it is chilled, they are still to be classified in the same heading as the corresponding fresh fruit and nut. Therefore, you have a fruit which is fresh, you have a fruit which is chilled. This note 2 tells whether it is chilled or fresh, both of them will fall under the same heading. Now, dried fruit or dried nuts. If you are having dried fruit or dried nuts, it may be partially rehydrated. So we are talking about rehydration or treating it. Therefore, it is not when you say dried fruit or dried is maybe absolutely without water, etc. It may say it may be partially rehydrated, but it must be only the rehydration or treatment only for the following purposes, that is additional preservation or stabilization to improve or maintain their appearance. For example, you apply small quantities of glucose syrup so that it looks very shiny. You buy dates, etc. You find very shiny dates sometimes in the thing. you can do this type of treatment to maintain their appearance so that it looks like very wet, etc., and looks very glossy, so it looks very attractive when you are seeing in the particular product. They say a dried fruit but treated to improve its appearance, for example, by small quantities of glucose syrup or vegetable oil, but so long as it retains the character of the dried fruit or dried nut, it can still be there. So this is what we call as the chapter note. And these are also our aids to classification. When we come to interpretive rules, you will see that. Now I'm only giving you a bird's eye view of one section. I have taken a number of chapters in that. Within that, I am talking about one chapter, and I'm talking about section notes and chapter notes in that particular chapter. Now you come to heading. 0801, 4-digit as you saw is a heading. It is a coconuts, Brazil nuts, cashew nuts, fresh or dried, whether or not shelled or peeled. So you are talking about cashew nuts in the shell, cashew nuts which are peeled, they are fresh cashew nut, dried cashew nuts, all of them will fall under 0801. Then you talk about other nuts, fresh or dried, whether or not shelled or peeled. 0811, fruits and nuts, uncooked or cooked by steaming or boiling in water, frozen, whether or not containing added sugar or other sweetening matter. So this heading gives you a clear indication of what is the scope of the product content within that particular heading. So again, headings are very, very important for the purpose of classification. Now 0804. From the heading, I'm now going to subheadings. 0804 is dates, figs, pineapples, avocados, guavas, mangoes, mangosteens, fresh or dried. So in the 6th digit, you get 080410 dates, 080420 figs. So you get at the 6th digit level, you are getting the very specific product. At the 8th digit, I may have dates fresh. I may have dates not fresh, figs fresh, and figs dried. I may have any of them in 08. Under 20, I can have 20, 10, 20, 20, two different products also I can have. Therefore, the classification, the 6th digit is, you are still breaking it into a minor part. So section to chapter, chapter heading to subheading, and within the subheading, you may also have further classifications possible at the 8th digit. I will come to that. Now, I want you also to note under 080410, there is a hyphen and dates. Now that hyphen is not put just for the sake of it. It is what we call in the tariff as a single dash heading. I'm going to deal with this. There is a single dash heading, there's a double dash heading, there's a 3 dash heading, there's a 4 dash, which means each one is a step down from. If there is a first digit, figs. If there is a double dash and then say fresh, then the fresh figs is a subset of figs. There is another double dash which talks about dried figs. So it will be there. So you can have further classifications below the figs also. That will be then double dash or triple dash or 4 dash. All that you know is if something is 3 dash, you know it is falling under some other single dash or double dash heading. If it is a double dash, it falls under some other single heading. That again, the structure is also very clearly defined in this particular case. Now we will see further drill down from section note from the subheading, which is at the 6th digit level. We now go into the 8th digit level. That is what we call as a tariff line. 8 digit is what as a tariff line, and you will see in the GST, the definition of tariff line, subheadings, headings, etc. All of them follow the same structure, which is this HSM structure, which is what is a custom structure also. Now you see 080450 is guavas, mangoes, and mangosteens. Now you have 5010, it talks about guavas fresh or dried. Then you find there is a 3 dash mangoes fresh, which means under 080450 single dash, 3 dash is a subset which is a mangoes fresh. Now under that I have Alfonso, Banganapalli, Chausa, Dasheri, Langda, Kesar, Totapuri, Mallika, like that I'm getting. Then I say mangoes, so which are sliced and dried, mango pulp, other. Now you see, again, kindly note, mangoes fresh has got 3 dash, correct? When you come to Alfonso to other, it will all be 4 dash, which means they are different varieties of mangoes. It falls as a subset of mangoes. But the moment you go to mango sliced and dried, it will become 3 dash only, which means it is not fresh, it becomes sliced and dried, and you make it in a pulp, that is another commodity under 3- level, and all others other than fresh, other than sliced dried, other than mango pulp, if you can think of something, that will come under other category. So this is how the structure of the HSN works. And all this Alfonso Banganapalli are peculiar to India because we wanted to know what type of products we are exporting to other countries where we have a market, etc. And these are very specific. No other country has a Banganapalli or a Alfonso, etc. So these are very peculiar to India. Therefore, we have decided that we must have this classification in order to collect statistics of our various exports and imports. Obviously, nobody will be importing mango into India. It will be more for export purposes. So, stopping at this point, broadly, therefore, you know there are 21 sections. There are 97 chapters. Under the chapters, you got 1,222 headings. Under 1,222, you have 5,000 and odd headings, subheadings. Now, under the headings, subheadings, you have these tariff lines. This is the entire structure, and this is what is going to be followed even in the GST. So this is broad. Of course, we are now going into the rules for the interpretation of how to determine the classification of a particular commodity. Now, what are the aids to classification? The first is headings and subheadings. What are actually the wordings used to the headings and subheadings? Then you will talk about section notes and chapter notes. Then there are interpretative rules under the customs tariff, under the HSN, which are identical, which will also be used. Now, beyond this, what is not contained in our customs tariff is the HSN explanatory notes, where the explanatory note gives a lot more information about what is included or what is excluded from a particular heading they give. And also, when most of the things we'll be able to find the reasons also. It's a very scientific method of doing things. So in this hierarchy is how we are now going to look at whenever we are going to see various issues, how to determine the classification. We are going to follow this particular structure, headings and subheadings. There are section notes and chapter notes. There are interpretative rules. And if you are not able to find explanatory notes, for example, I'll just give you an example just because of HSN explanatory notes, how we came. Now in GST, we had an issue called for fresh tamarind and dried tamarind. I think if I remember right, fresh tamarind was 6%, dried tamarind was 12%. Now, what is the meaning of this thing? Because the moment is 6 and 12 are there, there's definitely going to be a dispute. Now, whether I pick up something, fresh tamarind from the tree, put it on the ground, take it to my warehouse, in the normal atmospheric temperature, heat, etc., there is a drying taking place. Will that make it as a dried tamarind? Then, because if that makes a dry, the department will say everything will be dried tamarind, will be attract 12% and you will not have 6%. When you get into the explanatory notes, explanatory clearly says whatever is the drying which is incidental to picking up this, etc., will not be treated as drying. Conscious drying, you must specifically do drying, then and only it will become dried tamarind. So when you have that information, you are able to represent to the government or point out why this particular tamarind, even though it is dried, it is a natural drying because I'm not able to sell the next day morning, 4 days it is drying. So it is getting dried a little. That doesn't make it a dried tamarind. It continues to remain as fresh tamarind. Whereas what I do is in my sealing, I put all of them, dry it in this hot sun for 103, 104 degrees for a period of 10-15 days and then take, then I am consciously drying, then it will become a dried tamarind, which will go into 12% trade. So HSN explanatory notes, in some cases, not in all cases, some cases will be able to give you a clue as to what they mean by a dried tamarind. A tamarind which is dried consciously as opposed to a drying which takes place naturally. So HSN explanatory notes are also very, very important in order to arrive at a classification. Now I get into the general rules for the interpretation of the HSN or the tariff, and this all will apply to GST also. There is absolutely no difficulty on that. It will apply. Now, there are 6 rules of interpretation. I'll start with rule 1. In the general parlance, 95% of the commodity should get classified by the application of the general rules for interpretation. Now, in this rule 1, I started somewhere, but the first portion of is the headings of the chapters, etc., are given only for convenience. For legal purposes, the classification shall be determined according to the terms of the headings and any relative section or chapter notes, and provided such headings or notes do not otherwise require according to the following provisions. Therefore, the first rule is classification will be what is the term of the heading? Are there any relative section notes or chapter notes? So you have to classify only on the basis of the headings and the relative section and chapter note. When I talk about headings, is the 4-digit is what we talk about, not chapter 8, fresh fruits, etc., peels. That is only for giving you broad content of that particular chapter. For classification, you have to go to the 4-digit heading and the relative section or chapter notes. If you cannot determine the classification with reference to the terms of the headings, with reference to section note, with reference to chapter notes, then you can go to the other rules, which are rules 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So rule 1 is the primary rule, and that is what we will now concentrate on before we proceed to the other rules also. So this is a very, very simple principle which has also been upheld by the Supreme Court. I will come to that also. I'm just now taking some examples so that we know how we are applying rule 1. Now, you have purchased certain ball bearings. You want to know what is the classification of the ball bearings. So you look at the customs tariff. When you look at the tariff or a HSN, you will find there is a heading called 8482 that talks about ball or roller bearings. Chapter 84 is various types of machinery, etc. Chapter 85 is electrical and electronic goods. Chapter 8482 is ball or roller bearings. And within that, a subheading 848210 is ball bearings. So you know very clearly ball bearings apply rule 1 in terms of the relative heading and the subheading. You don't require any notes, etc., because ball bearings are specifically identified under 848210. So this is again a very, very clear thing. So you have alphabetical indexes. So if you have a product, you may look at the alphabetical index to see if it is specifically covered. Then you may go to the heading and find out whether they match. And of course, there are alphabetical indexes where it need not necessarily flow from this interpretation, but because of certain decisions also, you may get some classification. So you can look into that. But the first thing, therefore, when a product is given for classification is to try and look where it will fall within these 21 sections, identify the chapter, and then get into the chapter to see where it will fall. So this is a very simple example of a classification of a ball bearing. Now you go. I went to Krishna Sweets. I purchased Madras mixture half a kilo. What is the classification of Madras mixture? When you are talking about parathas also, you got section chapter 2106 or 1905. We will come to that slightly later. Madras mixture. Now, chapter 21 is miscellaneous edible preparations. And there are only 2 headings under the HSN. 2106, food preparations not elsewhere specified or included, and 210690 other. And we have got a specific item called protein concentrates and textured protein substances. Therefore, this is again a residual heading. And therefore, and if you are talking about a Rasagulla, or if you are talking about a Madras mixture, or you are talking about Haldiram's namkeens, etc., they are very peculiar to India. Therefore, we have a supplementary note 6. And in that supplementary note 6, we say tariff item 210690, which covers other. Within that, there is a 99 others that includes sweetmeats commonly known as mishtans or mitai, are called by any other name. They also include products commonly known as namkeens, mixtures, gujia, chabana, are called by any other name. Such products remain classified in these subheadings irrespective of the nature of the ingredients. So you don't go, this is based on kadal maavu, therefore I should go here. This is based on ulutha maavu, therefore I should go somewhere. Don't go on the basis of that. Simply, so long as it answers this description, it will come under. This supplementary note 6 is an aid to the classification of the product peculiar to India, which is a Madras mixture. If you remember in paratha also, 2106 is one item, and 1905 bakery products, etc., that is also under contention. We'll come to that. And it is because of the supplementary note, we can get an idea that namkeens, mixtures, etc., will fall under 210690 without difficulty. Otherwise, by ruling out all specific heads, we may still be able to come to the chapter 21, but there could be a lot of disputes. Therefore, to avoid the disputes, a supplementary note 6 was introduced, and it is very peculiar to India. So this is one classification where, because of the supplementary note, you are able to get at a correct classification. Now, ATM receipt, paper roll. You go to an ATM, you withdraw 20,000 rupees cash, you say, I want a receipt. A receipt is printed, and on that you will sign State Bank of India, this branch, etc. Then you are getting amount withdrawn, what is your thing, etc. There is a problem whether that ATM paper roll will be classified under chapter 48 or chapter 49. Chapter 48 simply paper, chapter 49 is printed matter. In chapter 49, 4911 is other printed matter. So what you will have to do is, you are having an ATM receipt roll, which is simply a paper roll on which something will be printed when a transaction takes place. But the ATM receipt has already pre-printed the bank name or whatever is there, etc. That is already pre-printed. And what is further printed when you withdraw is the amount you withdrew, the time at which you withdrew, and what is your ledger balance, etc. That's what you are getting. Now you look at chapter 48, 4811, I have highlighted portion of paper, surface decorated or printed in rolls. So this is paper, this is also in roll. It is also printed because I said the name of the bank, etc. It's surface decorated or printed in rolls. Chapter 49 is other printed matter. Now, of course, all classification disputes will come because the rate of tax under 48 will be different. The rate of tax under chapter 49 will be different, whichever is higher. One principle of classification we all will know is that classification which gives the lower route is the OCC, that classification which will give higher is for the revenue. That is a very, very fundamental principle, but we are not going into that principle. We are talking about interpreting it scientifically. So here you are having surface decorated or printed. Therefore, you are talking about a printed paper also falling under 48, and you are also having other printed matter which is also under chapter 49. Both of them are there. Therefore, how do I classify this particular thing? Now you will see there is the chapter note 12 in chapter 48. This is very important because if you want to classify it under 48, the classification must be in terms of the headings and any relative section or chapter note. Now this chapter note 12 to chapter 48 says, paper, I'm just to get reading the highlighted portion, paper printed with motifs, characters or pictorial representations which are not merely incidental to the primary use of the goods fall in chapter 49. Therefore, now this note says, printed paper I'm saying in 48, but I'm saying if the printing is merely incidental to the primary use, it will be in 48. If the printing is not incidental to the primary, it will fall in 49. Now, therefore, problem is, what is printing which is incidental to the primary use of the goods? Now, you go to Archie's. You want to buy a notepad. So, you are buying a notepad. It's a beautiful pink color. And underneath that slight pink color, you have, let us say, a Walt Disney character being printed. Now, when you have that Walt Disney character printed on the paper, are you saying that the printing of the Walt Disney character, let us say Mickey Mouse, is incidental to the primary use or is not merely incidental to the primary use of the goods? Because why it happens is, in our case, there is printed, which talks about the bank, branch, etc., already pre-printed. There is some other printing which takes place when a transaction. Therefore, what should be, whether something is incidental or not incidental to the primary use of the goods. Now, you can easily say it is already printed to the bank, etc. All that it is not incidental to the primary use is a very, very important thing because it comes from the ATM of a particular machine, of a particular branch, etc. Therefore, it is not incidental. Somebody says it is still a receipt with a preprint. What actually gets is printed and the transaction take place, then it goes under, therefore it will be under 48, it will not be a printed matter under 49. An argument is possible. Now you have a look, printed in 48 is also there, paper printed is also in 49, but in 48 there is chapter 12, note 12 which says, if the printing is incidental to the primary use of the goods, it will still remain. If it is not incidental, then it will go as a printing matter under 49. So you have a dispute of this nature. So to resolve this type of dispute, therefore, then we introduce a supplementary note, which says, notwithstanding contain anything in note 12. Therefore, in note 12, you try to resolve, but in the process, maybe a little more confusion was created. Therefore, we have a supplementary note, which says, if paper is printed with any character, name, logo, motif, or format, they will remain classified under the respective headings as long as such products are intended to be used for further printing or writing. In the notepad example I gave, it is with the Mickey Mouse thing, but you are still going to write further on that. In the ATM roll, you are going to print the details of the transaction. Therefore, the roll is meant for further printing or writing. So, because of the supplementary note, you will say ATM printer, notwithstanding it has got some pre-printing, will still come under 48 chapter, and it will not become a printed matter of chapter 49. So again, you can see the interplay between the various chapter notes, the supplementary notes, the headings, etc. You will have to see the interface. So I picked up a few examples like this to give you a feel for the tariff. So if you want to do a real very good classification, and if there is especially tax differences there, you must know fully what are all the various chapter notes, what are the applicable section notes, etc. You must know fully before you can get into the correct classification of product. Now I give another example. You are going to a shop, you want to buy an electric motor for your household washing machine. The washing machine, the motor has gone off, so you want to buy a motor. What will be the classification of the motor? There is a chapter heading 8501, 4-digit is heading. It says electric motors and generators. It talks about 8501, 10 is motors of output less than a particular capacity, 20 is more than some capacity, we forget it. Therefore, electric motors are under 8501. There is a heading called 8450, which talks about household washing machines. And under the household washing machine, there is a subheading 845090, it says parts. Now, these electric motors are for the household washing machine, which means it's really structured to fit into that particular washing machine, the space where it is to be done. So it is exactly designed for that particular washing machine, so that it becomes a part of that. Now, what will be the classification? Whether you will put it as a part of the washing machine at 8450, or will you still classify it as an electric motor at 8501? Now, you will be able to decide this classification if and only if you know that there is a specific note on how to classify parts in section 16. And section 16 covers chapter 84 and chapter 85. Two chapters are covered in section 16, a very important section on machinery, etc., and electrical and electronic appliances. Therefore, clearly, both of them appear to be true. But what does rule 1 say? You must decide in terms of the relative headings or the section or chapter notes. And if none of them can give guidance, you can go to the subsequent rule. So today we have to see whether we can still apply rule 1 and get it. Now you see this particular note 2 to section 16. Kindly, for the purpose of this session, don't read everything. I'm only wanting to give you a feel. Note 2A. According to note 2A, the highlighted portion, parts which are goods included in any of the headings of chapter 84 or 85. Please forget whatever is in the bracket, or in all cases to be classified in the respective heading. So the first thing you are getting in note 2 to section 16 is the entire note 2A, B, C is for classification of parts. And it says parts which are goods included in any of the headings of 84 or 85 are in all cases to be classified in the respective headings. Now what do you see? You have a motor. The motor is of a washing machine. Now that motor is a part, no doubt, of the washing machine. But it is goods included in any of the headings of chapter 84 or 85. 8501 specifically covers motors. Therefore, this part, which is goods included in chapter 85, in all cases should be classified in the respective heading, which means 8501. So you don't bother whether the machine is of the motor is of a dishwasher, the motor is of a laundry machine, it is of a household machine, it is a motor for something else, for pumping water. You don't get into any of it. So long as it is a motor, it will be 8501, whether it is standalone or it is a part of something, because of application of rule 2A. The only thing you look at is within bracket, there are certain headings. It should not fall under any of those headings. We are not concerned with that. This is again, as I said, give a feel for classification of parts, which is a very important subject. And we are going to look at, there is a separate note in section 17 when we come to GST, because in GST, the maximum problem we are going to see is with reference to whether something is a part of a motor vehicle attracting 28% GST, or it will be somewhere else attracting 8 or 12%, etc. And there the dispute is going to be very, very significant. Therefore, classification of parts becomes very critical. And this note is what you will find in all other places also, is goods which are included in any specific heading of chapter 84, 85 will always be classified in that heading, irrespective of whether it is a part of some other bigger machine. You don't get into that question at all. And I'm not talking about section note 2B, 2C, etc. As I said, because it's a session to give a broad view of the classification principles and not to go into all the minute details in a particular case. Now, I come to another case. Now, I have purchased certain bolts and nuts of steel, but those bolts and nuts are specifically made for use in a motor vehicle. Now, there is section 7318, section 15, which talks about from 72 to 83, is considering of various articles of iron, steel, etc. we are talking about. 73 is articles of iron and steel. 7318 is screws, bolts, nuts, rivets, cartridge, etc. of iron or steel. This is the first thing. The other is 8708, parts and accessories of motor vehicles of heading 8701 to 8705. So we don't want to get 8701 is tractor, you may have 8703 passenger vehicles, etc. You have different types of vehicles. It is a screw, it is a bolt, it's a nut, bolt and nut is made of steel, no doubt, and it is made for use only in the motor vehicle because you have to fit it in a particular place. It is designed for that. So the question comes whether you will talk about 7318 screws, bolts, nuts, rivets generally, or you will talk about that as a part and accessories of motor vehicle heading 8701 or 05. Just like you saw a note 2 in section 16, which talks about how to define part, there is also a classification principles on how to classify goods which are of general, parts which are of general use. Now that is what I am going to talk about, classification of parts. This is under section 15, which is base metals, which is chapter, as I said, 72 to 83. All of them are covered under that. Note 2 to section 15. You can see that throughout this schedule, which means for the entire schedule, which means for the entire GST also, the expression parts of general use means articles of heading 7307, 7312, 7315, 7317 or 7318. Our item, I said, nuts and bolts are coming under 7318. You saw it in the previous slide. You can see that 7318 screws, bolts, nuts, etc. Parts of general, therefore the first is they define. There are certain parts which are of general use. It may be used with motor car, it may be used with an electric motor, it may be made of iron or steel, it may be made of plastic, which means we'll go to chapter 39, it may be made of rubber, which will be in chapter 40, it may be made of aluminum, it will go in chapter 76, like this. So you have different parts which can be used, but if they are all coming under the definition of parts of general use, and similar articles, which means the same thing in aluminum, same thing in copper, same thing in bronze, whatever you want, all of them will also be covered under the same thing. If that is what, then they will always be classified under the particular heading. Therefore, what happens here, I got nuts and bolts very specifically for use in a particular vehicle only, but it is a part of general use falling under 7318. So notwithstanding that it has a specific application in a particular motor vehicle, it will still be classified under 7318 and not as parts of motor vehicles. Now this again, as I said, will become very critical when we are talking about GST. Similarly, you can see springs and leaves of springs of base metal other than, so you have seen trucks, lorries having the leaf springs, there are 7 or 8 springs, one after the other, slightly reducing in size, like it will come in a different shape. All those springs maybe specifically for a Bharat Benz, a particular vehicle, but it is still springs and leaves of springs. They are defined as parts of general use. Therefore, they will be classified only under that particular base metal heading, and it will not be covered under any other heading. Therefore, there are two things. There is a definition of parts of general use, and also there is a how to define classify parts in either section 16. We'll get the same thing in section 17 also, and you are going to get that in chapter 90 also. We are going to talk about this classification. Now, classification of parts, therefore, is a very, very critical thing, but there are very, very specific rules. Now, all these classifications so far are on application of rule 1, which is it must be classified in terms of the relevant chapter heading or subheading read with the section notes and the chapter notes. Because you can classify all these with reference to these three elements, you classify only under rule 1 and you don't proceed beyond rule 1 at all. So this is some example of how to define parts of general use. Now I quickly do two cases, nothing more, just to say that this principle, that rule 1 is the primary rule, unless and until you can show that a classification cannot be done with rule 1, you are not allowed to proceed to any of the other rules. So the first time it was held, the Commissioner of Central Excise was the Simplex Mills, and there they specifically said, again, facts are different. I'm talking about what the observation of Supreme Court. According to rule 1, titles of sections and chapters and schedule are provided for ease of reference only. But for legal purposes, classification shall be determined according to the terms of the headings and any relevant section or chapter notes. Rule 1 gives primacy to section and chapter notes along with the terms of the headings. That's the observation. Similarly, in Salora International versus the Commission of Central Excise, Supreme Court said, in that particular case, they applied rule 2A of the rules for the interpretation, but Supreme Court said, you can go to rule 2A only if you can prove that the classification cannot be determined in terms of rule 1 and the relevant section or chapter notes. Again, I said I am not getting the facts because in Salora, based on the facts, I may have a different view, but we are not getting into that. The Supreme Court has also upheld the primacy of rule 1 in matters of classification. That is all that I wanted to convey through these two cases. Now, with that, we have finished rule 1. As I said, I gave some examples of simple headings. Then we talked about some headings. Then we are talking about chapter notes. Somewhere we have talked about subheading notes. Somewhere we are talking about rules for the classification of principles which are contained in the section notes of either section 15 or section 16. Therefore, all these is to give a feel for the classification based on rule 1. Now I come to quickly rule 2A, which is the you can go to rule 2A if and only if you cannot classify a commodity based on rule 1. And rule 2A is reads like this: any reference in a heading to an article shall be taken to include a reference to that article, incomplete or unfinished, provided that, as presented, the incomplete or unfinished article has the essential character of the complete or finished article. Therefore, what we are talking about is, if I say motor car in the heading, motor vehicle in a heading, I mean a complete finished motor vehicle. But the rule 2A says that reference also includes a reference to an article which is incomplete. So an incomplete or unfinished car will also be classified in the same heading as a finished or a complete car. That's the type of meaning we are getting. Incomplete or unfinished, only requirement is it must have the essential character of the complete or finished article. So two things: incomplete or unfinished, and what do you mean by essential character of the complete or finished article. Second, it shall also include a reference to that article, complete or finished, but presented unassembled or disassembled. So one is you give the full article which is incomplete. The other is you present that article but in a disassembled form. Both of them under rule 2A will get classified as per the tariff heading of the complete article. Now have a look at this. There are motor vehicles you see on the right. There are no, let us say, tires fitted, or under the bonnet if you open, there will be no engine. Therefore, the question arises, what will be the classification of a motor vehicle which does not have tires or engine? The HSN says you will not get it into the tariff anywhere. The HSN when it talks about Rule 2A and the incomplete or unfinished, gives a number of examples. One example which it gives will be a motor vehicle not fitted with tires or engine will be treated as an incomplete or unfinished goods having the essential character of a motor vehicle. Therefore, it will be classified as a motor vehicle under Chapter 7, 8703. As a motor vehicle is what it will be classified. Now, from this, you can try and find out what is the meaning of an essential character. If there is no engine, will the car run? Obviously, the car will not be able to run. Therefore, when they talk about in Rule 2A that it must have the essential character of the finished goods, it does not mean with reference to the functioning of the particular articles or goods. It is not with reference to that. Because if it is functioning, without an engine or without a tire, it cannot function. So you can never classify on the basis of these principles. Therefore, what you get is, can you finish this incomplete article into anything other than a motor vehicle? That is what the test of an essential character is. Here, you will buy 4 tires and fit it. You may get an engine and put it under the bonnet, and you can only complete it into a motor vehicle, and you cannot do anything with that. It's not that you can complete it into a tractor or something else. You cannot do that. Therefore, the essential character test is what can be the finished product which can come out of this unfinished or incomplete or unfinished goods is what you will have to ask. It is not essential character means whether it will function without that particular part. That's not the test which is coming out. The second portion of Rule 2A is talking about unassembled or disassembled goods. Now, on the right, you see a bicycle. Most of the time, the bicycle will come only in unassembled condition. You go and buy in the shop. The shopkeeper will say, sir, please wait for 20 minutes, and he will fix all of them and give the cycle to you. So all the parts are presented in unassembled means you don't have a separate tariff item for a cycle presented in this form. You have a separate heading for the handlebar. You may have separately for the wheel. You may have separately for other items, chains, etc. But for the entire thing presented, there is no heading. Therefore, you cannot classify this with reference to Rule 1. Therefore, you will come to Rule 2A. When you come to Rule 2A, then you will say, this is unassembled bicycle. Therefore, and it can be finished only into a bicycle. Therefore, it will be classified as a bicycle. So this is some examples of application of Rule 2A to incomplete or unfinished. If there is a separate heading for an incomplete car, then you would never come to 2A. You will use Rule 1 and say finished car here, unfinished car here, you will classify. When you don't have a separate heading under which you can classify an incomplete or unfinished goods, then and only then you apply Rule 2A, and then you start making this type of classification. This again is a very, very important thing. Now, some of these, as I said, in the motor vehicle, you will not find it anywhere else except the HSN explanatory notes. So knowing what is contained in the explanatory notes also gives you a lot of advantage in classification of various commodities. Now, I have given a few examples. This was a case. The person was actually making PVC doors and windows to be fitted in various buildings, but he was clearing it from his factory in the form of various types of top plans, side thing, this, etc., and various items. He was clearing them as one commodity as 12 parts of this, 12 parts of that, etc. From there, you can assemble 12 doors and 12 windows. The question came up whether it should be classified as PVC doors and windows or to be classified somewhere. Why it came? Obviously, 39, 25, 20 has a lower rate, 39, 25, 99. You can have as a rule of thumb, anything fall under others, unclassified others, will always generally have a higher rate than any product which is specifically identified in the tariff. You can look at the tariff. Most of the time, the classification others people will choose because others will have a higher rate of tax. Therefore, in this case, the tribunal went into how these are manufactured, then how these are cleared, what it is indicated in the invoice, etc. And on the basis of that, they say, these things cannot be classified. A collection of various types of plastic doors and windows are given. They are not classifiable. I have to apply Rule 2A. And at the site, they will actually be coming into existence as PVC doors and windows. Therefore, these are PVC doors and windows in unassembled form. And therefore, by application of Rule 2A, they should be treated as 39, 25, 20 various articles of we call them as in the case, doors, windows, etc. made of plastic. That's where it get classified. So there are again a number of examples under our case laws under the excise or customs on application of Rule 2A also. Now this is a very interesting case of Sony India. It went up to the Supreme Court. What had happened in this particular case was Sony was importing various parts for manufacture of color televisions from Thailand. It was also importing the picture tubes at that point of time from Japan. The picture tubes are always coming from Japan. The other parts, etc., were coming from Thailand. Now, these were coming very regularly over a period of 2 years. If I remember right, there are 98 bills of entry over a period of 2 years. And the department, at the end of 2 years, issued a notice saying what you have imported in all these 98 bills of entry is really 2,500 TVs in unassembled or disassembled or incomplete thing. Therefore, these should be assessed as televisions. Obviously, television had a higher rate of customs duty when imported than parts of television sets which are imported into India at that particular point of time. So, in this case, a lot of examples went in to show how complicated operations are taking place in the factory of Sony to manufacture the color television, etc. Therefore, what is coming in is only parts, etc. All those things were there. But the more important point, as far as the Supreme Court is concerned, is when you are classifying goods, you must classify the goods as they are presented to customs. Because you will see in Rule 2A, one of the important words is provided that as presented, the good is the essential character. Therefore, we are talking what is as presented. It means I file one bill of entry, I have imported certain goods, I present it. Now, you can't take that, combine it, some other bill of entry coming 6 months later, club all of them for 2 years and then say what you have imported is 5,000 television sets. You cannot do that. Therefore, what they talked about is it has one, apart from the complicated process to manufacture a complete television, etc. They said, you have to have the product share to be classified with GR1. What you got was really various parts, etc. Apply the headings of those parts and classify them. You can't club 98 bills of entry that also spread over a period of time and then say it as there. Now, at that particular point of time, there was also a portion in HSN which talked about whether the process of manufacture should be complicated or simple. They have said in Rule 2A, provided that only simple assembly operations are involved. Now, because of the complicated process which we had in problem, it was taken up with the WCO, and then the WCO modified the HSN explanatory note to say that the nature of the process undertaken, whether complicated simply, is not relevant. What is relevant is whether you are doing any operations on the imported part as such. If you do some operation imported process, then Rule 2A will not apply. But you have all the parts, but the assembly process is complicated, then whether it is complicated or simple now, as the law stands today, it is immaterial. Whereas at that time, simple operations alone are permitted in Rule 2A. If it is complicated, Rule 2A will not apply. Therefore, these are all the various nuances which were touched upon in the argument of Sony, and the case was held to be, you must assess them as parts by application of Rule 1, and Rule 2A cannot apply. It's 610, okay. Now, I'm just giving you one more example. There's a Pioneer Embroideries Limited. This is again a Supreme Court case. This is again a very interesting case. One person was importing 12 non-computerized second-hand embroidery machines. All these machines went from one place to Korea. Then in Korea, he bought 12 new Jacquard control device reading system, which is a computerized system, like a numerical control, like a Jacquard control device was there. Now, both of them were imported together from Korea and were presented for assessment. Now, on import, these 12 non-computerized will be clubbed with the integrated with the 12 new Jacquard to make it as a computer-operated embroidery machine. And there was a concessional customs duty to computerized embroidery machine. Therefore, the Pioneer said, if you look at these two, this non-computerized plus computerized together, put together, will become a computerized embroidery machine, and therefore the concessional customs duty should be extended. Therefore, whether Rule 2A is applicable or not. Both the tribunal and the Supreme Court said no. These are two separately non-computerized second-hand embroidery machine and 12 new Jacquard control system. You are going to integrate them only after it comes into India. Therefore, what is imported and presented is not a computerized embroidery machine. But rule 2A is you are presenting them unassembled or disassembled. There also point is it is neither unassembled or disassembled. There are two separate procurements which are made up from two different people, and all of them are imported together. Therefore, they say rule 2A will not be applicable. You have a separate second-hand embroidery machine. You have a separate Jacquard control device reading systems. Each one will be classified separately and taxed separately is what the Supreme Court held in the particular case. Again, application of rule 2A. Now, this is what they made. I don't think I will read that. Now I come to rule 2B. Any reference in a heading to a material or substance shall be taken to include a reference to mixtures or combinations of that material or substance with other materials. So I may say only cotton, but if you say if a cotton in a heading, you must also consider it includes a reference to a combination of cotton with something also would be generally covered. Then any reference to goods of a given material, cotton shirts, then it says you'd always also include a reference to goods consisting wholly or partly of such material. So it may be 80% cotton, 20% something, that's also possible. They say this is general principle. A reference in a heading talks about only one material, then the rule is you must also read it as covering mixtures or combinations of that material with something else. Similarly, if you say goods made of such and such, you must also understand it. It can be wholly or it can be partly made. And how you classify when you have materials which are partly covered and partly there, that they say will be covered under rule 3. That's what rule 2B is talking about. Now this also makes a lot of interesting thing. You have a stainless steel cup and it has a plastic handle. There is a heading table, kitchen or other household articles, steel 7323. There is also table, kitchen, other household articles of plastic 3924. Therefore, the same item is there in 73 if it is articles, if it is 3924. Therefore, what do you see? There is a stainless steel, there is a plastic. The rule 2B says any reference to one 7323 articles means it can contain other materials also. Same thing with it. Therefore, if you take plastic, then you are talking about if plastic is there, then should I consider plastic and not the steel? Therefore, under rule 2A, 2B, this is what you will be doing. A stainless steel mug with a plastic handle will be classified in 7323. On the ground, what? The plastic is only the plastic handle, which is a very small portion of the entire stainless steel travel mug. Therefore, essentially it is stainless steel mug. Therefore, you will say it is still 7323. Now I am going to, if they suppose it has got equal amount of stainless steel and also plastic, for whatever reason, it is there. Then it can come under two heading, 3924 also plastic with something else, 7323 steel with something else. So both of them will be there. Then what you do is in such type situation, then you go to rule 3 for the purpose of classification. So a goods containing two items, each of them classified separately. How to determine the classification? Generally, rule 2 says go by whatever if you got one single item, it can include other substances, etc. So generally, therefore, you look out what is the predominantly stainless steel. So you go to 7323. But if both are equal, then rule 2B will not be able to show you the classification. Then you proceed to rule 3. Now here also in Innovision Foods Private Limited, it's a very interesting case also. They apply rule 3. The classification of the product called Paneer Darbari at the Tribunal Bangalore in 2017, Paneer Darbari. What they went is the classification. They said it has about 58.69% of vegetables. Then they say some small amount of water and some 37% others, which must be cheese actually, this must be our paneer. But they said, because vegetables predominant, I will apply rule 2B and have the classification at 200110, which talks about vegetable preparation. So rule 2B read with 3B. I don't know if somebody says, when I say Paneer Darbari, I give more predominance to the paneer, notwithstanding it is 37% and the vegetable may be 58%, whether that will give an essential character or not. Again, there are doubts. It's not that if everything can be put in mathematical terms, we are not required as lawyers. No? Therefore, definitely there is still scope for interpretation in each of these items. But the tribunal went on the basis around 60% of is vegetable, All others are 40%. Therefore, vegetables predominate. Therefore, I will take it as a vegetable preparation. So innovation is with reference to our ITC various types of products. You get the packaged products with the paneer, kofta, etc. You boil and then you get it. That type of all these items were dealt with in this particular case, paneer darbari. 2B, application of rule 2B. Similarly, this is again a very interesting case. Globetrotters, rifampicin is a medicine for tuberculosis. That is clearly classifiable to 3004, 1952. But you have a combination of rifampicin with two other medicines, which I put them here. We don't have. But there is a classification of other anti-tubercular drugs. Because the moment you have other anti-tubercular drugs, as I said, rule of thumb, the rate of duty will be higher. Whereas if it is rifampicin, it will be more or less exempt, because it is if you are talking about TB, etc., it will be definitely a life-saving drug. Therefore, it will be under exemption. And they applied rule 2B to say it is a medicament containing rifampicin. Therefore, according to rule 2B, it will contain combination of rifampicin also will be covered. And what they noted is both the irazosinate as also pyrazinamide, both are also anti-tubular TB drugs. Because all of them are anti-tubular drugs, it's a combination of all the three, and rifampicin is the main constituent. Therefore, it will be classified under the heading corresponding to rifampicin is what. Therefore, you get a combination of drugs, ibuprofen, you have brufen and also paracetamol. So where will you classify? So you have, when you have combinations of drugs, you also look at what is the rule 2B. He looked at rifampicin as a medicament. It's possible all three or all two are 50-50%. Then of course we will go to rule 3A, 3B, 3C, etc. in order to determine how to classify that particular product. So these are some examples of application of rule 3. Now I have to come to 3A, but considering it is already 6:15, I wanted to stop at rule 4. I just want to know, Prithvi, can I go, or I can continue on the next day and then take it up along with GST? That's not a problem, because more important is if there is too much of substance and people have to digest. So I don't want to proceed unless, can I stop and then we have questions, or I should go ahead with 3A and conclude with the rule 4?
Sir, whatever you suggest,
then I think I'll stop, because we have about an hour and 15 minutes. I think there is enough for rule 1, rule 2A, 2B, and also the section note, chapter notes, etc. for people to digest. So I will take up 3A and 4, and then the GST portions, etc., or 5 and 6, and the GST portions in the next session. So yes, I stop here. And of course, questions are welcome, and any comments. Suppose you feel that I'm going very fast or it is too technical, you can tell me, then I can modulate it for the next session to the extent possible.
Sure, sir. Thank you. So now the floor is for all the participants. If you have any questions, you can raise your hands in the app, or you can just put in your questions in the chat box. We will take up the questions. Sir, you can stop screen sharing, sir, now. So
yeah. Yeah, I'll do that.
Yes. Sir, I had got a question earlier in the chat box.
Okay, just one thing. Okay, you have disabled. Okay, go ahead.
I will just read it out to you, sir.
Okay.
Sir, so the question is, in GS Auto International, Supreme Court had not considered the true test of classification of parts under CTH 86 to 88. That is, it had ignored section 2 of section 17. In subsequent decision, that is Intel Design Raja Forgings, the Supreme Court gave cognizance to these tests. However, didn't specifically overruled or modified GS Auto decisions. How to go forward when the department is putting so much stress on GS Auto decision? Thanks.
Yeah, and I think the answer to that is very clear. See, the problem is generally if a decision is made without a proper assistance to the court and they don't consider a very important provision, then of course it results in a decision which becomes very difficult, especially if it is a Supreme Court decision, to cite it and to overcome it before the tribunals, etc. Therefore, one thing is definitely to be very careful whenever you are doing any matter, either the High Court or Supreme Court, to be completely prepared. That's one, of course, for future. But past, I think one thing is we'll have to definitely point out and distinguish. See, because just like if GS Auto was in our favor, we would probably be using it even if it is not correctly decided. The department is also doing that. So we don't get into whether it is correct. We have to point out what is the defect. Had you considered Rule 2, etc., what would have been the decision, and that is what is required to be found out. Of course, because it is Supreme Court, you have a problem. You have to either refer to a larger bench, or in some other decision they have to specifically overrule, saying that it is sub silentio on that particular point, and therefore that cannot be considered as a good law. But even in that situation, there are cases where in the tribunal and the High Court, not the High Court because classification never goes to High Court, in the tribunal we have been able to point out, and of course there are some members who have are bold enough to say, yes, the Supreme Court had not considered this particular aspect, and I consider this aspect, and therefore I am applying the law differently. That's possible. But otherwise, yes, you have the same difficulty. If it is followed, you have to go to the Supreme Court and then only point out how GS Auto was not correctly decided and argue that. I don't think you have any shortcut to that.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I have. I'm seeing two hands raised. I'll unmute Mr. Bhushan Kulkarni first. Mr. Bhushan, you can ask your question. I've unmuted you. Mr. Bhushan, can you hear me?
I don't know. Seems to be.
Sir, but I think there's some audio issues, but he has sent the message in the chat box. I'll read it
Okay.
out. Read out. How do you apply Rule 2A for other commodities like motor talking, like motor talking under 8501 imported in unassembled form?
Yeah. Now, when you have a motor in unassembled form, in the unassembled form, you cannot apply Rule 1 because it's a collection of parts for which there is no single heading. Therefore, you will apply Rule 2A and then say it is a motor in unassembled form, and therefore you will still classify under 8501 by application of Rule 2A only.
Okay, sir. Sir, I'll unmute Ms. Archana Jain. Ma'am, you can ask your question. I've unmuted you.
Good evening, sir. It was a wonderful deliberation, very lucid and very clear. I have one query. We are manufacturing some knitted fabric, and as per SETA, there is a separate chapter for knitted and crochet fabrics. The machines are classified as knitting machines, and we are preparing some fabric out of it. One thing is the whole fabric like a running fabric, and other thing what we do is we just put it in a shape that can be laser cut later on and can be used as an upper for the high-end sports shoes. So my query is whether to classify both of them under the same chapter or it has to be done separately. Thank you so much, sir.
Now, I don't think I'll be able to answer that question unless I look at the particular tariff item. And as you know, section chapter 50 to 61 is covered under textiles and textiles article under section 11 of the tariff. And you have a lot of items, but one thing I'm trying to, if you're talking about, yes, knitted and crocheted fabrics, yes, they are separately covered, just like you have woven fabrics, etc. But whenever we are talking about a running length and also not in running length, The only thing is to convert whether the not in running length, whether it has become a made-up textile article. That's what I think we'll have to look at. Therefore, it is a very fact-specific thing which I have to look at. What are the competing entries in order to tell you what exactly will be the classification. But generally, what you will find is when you have I'm in fact in my subsequent presentation there are 1 or 2 examples of that also coming, where the department said something is a made-up textile article, whereas whether it is a simple gray fabric and therefore should fall under cotton fabrics, etc. Dispute was also there, and it was also resolved by looking at the various section and chapter notes. So the more important thing is what are the 2 competing entries is what I require, and based on the competing entries, then we'll have to look at the section notes and chapter notes in order to determine which one will be applicable in a particular case. Generally, running length, generally we are talking about running length, will not be talked about as a made-up textile article, whereas if you have converted them into very specific, then it becomes a made-up textile article. So that distinction is what I'm able to tell you now. Unless, of course, I have more details, I don't think I'll be able to answer that question.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for this insight. It is of great help. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? You can raise your hands in the app, or you can send me a message in the chat box. So there's one question from Mr. Karthik DR. I'll put it in the chat box so that everyone can have a look at it.
Okay. Okay.
Sir, I've put it. You want me to read, sir?
Yeah, no, is explanatory notes binding? Sometimes many people will go with customs ruling, US cross. That's the question, no?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah, it's right. No, see, explanatory notes will certainly be binding because there are Supreme Court decision in Woodcraft Industries and a number of other industries where they have said the explanatory notes is a safe guide because it is composed of committees of technical persons, and if they have given a view, certainly it has. I would not say it's a persuasive value, and most of the time in India, persuasive means actually binding, because if it is specifically made by HSN on a particular point, it definitely carries, let's say, 98, because I still can't say binding. The ruling can be different, but you will say 99% chances are that explanatory notes will be followed and will be taken into account. Now, where you don't have an explanatory notes clarifying that particular aspect, because the tariff is common across the world, and you have the United States border cross rulings available freely on the web, and all the rulings are available. If you have a similar product, you always try to show how other countries are classifying in order to drive home the point. Again, persuasive to show this is how, for example, the United States has looked at it, and this is the ruling, and my product is the same. Therefore, but the same ruling should apply here also, and it cannot be classified differently. Is something we can put. Sometimes the department will accept, sometimes it will not accept, but many times we have found tribunals taking those into account as a persuasive and agreeing with that particular, because you can disagree, because if they've forgotten or if they have not looked at some particular aspect, you can say the cross ruling is not binding. But we use extensively both HSN explanatory notes as also the cross rulings to buttress the particular classification. Both of them are having a high persuasive value, but the explanatory notes has a much higher persuasive value than a US cross ruling.
Yes, sir. Sir, I'll unmute Mr. Ganesh. Mr. Ganesh? Yes, sir. You can ask.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Good evening, sir. I'm Ganesh from Atlas Copco. So we normally manufacture filters, and we have some import or export of filter elements. But during some export or import, so we have asked to classify filter elements as per their constituent materials. But that filter elements we have particularly shaped and manufactured for the particular filters only. They are not just square block or anything particularly which can be fitted in anywhere, like a filter or anything like a net or anything. But they are particularly shaped for the particular filters only. So still we have to classify the as per the constituent material, or we can classify in 8 for 2 1 parts.
I think somebody has to, I couldn't hear him fully. It was something to do with classification based on the constituent material, etc. is what he was saying, but I couldn't
Yes,
hear
sir.
him very clearly what exactly that. If somebody can repeat the question, if you are able to hear it clearly.
Sir, I think his question is based on the shape of the commodity.
Correct.
So whether a different, how do you distinguish that? Mr.
Can I
Ganesh, if I'm not
repeat?
wrong.
Yeah, can I repeat the question, sir?
Yeah, please.
Yes, sir. No.
Yeah, actually, we import or export some filters,
Okay.
and we manufacture filter elements also, but
Okay.
they are of specific shape which will be fitted inside the filters.
Okay.
So as per the notification number 24 2013, the customs is saying the filter elements we have to classify it as per their constituent materials only, but they are not of a shape of simple block or rectangular shape. They are of particular shape which is particularly fitted in that element only, filters only. So still we have to classify it in as per the material only, or we can go in chapter heading 8421 parts.
I don't think I will be able to answer this again unless I have complete details of what you call as the filter element with the constituent material, and you are saying something it is specifically shaped, etc. Therefore, unless I have that, I don't think I'll be able to answer it, because classification is a very tricky thing. A very specific classification, I must know what the product which has come in, what are you completing into, in order to determine whether it will partake the character of part. Just because it already comes in a particular shape and then you will formulate into a part, or it isn't something like running material, because you're also talking about constituent material. So that gives me a doubt. The only thing I can do is, if you give me probably send in writing what exactly is, I can have a look at it. But these are very, very specific classifications which have to be examined thoroughly. I don't think it'll be offhand answer is possible in these cases.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. So we'll take up one more question from Ms. Smriti.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Sir, such a whether presentation, sir, like as usual. I have one question, sir. So when it comes to classification, whether the classification of a commodity or a good is determined as per the nature of the classification of the good or the commodity, or the description that is given to that particular good or a commodity, because the description may match the usage of the goods, but the description may not match the nature of the goods. So how the description of goods plays a very prevalent role in determination of classification, or you determine the classification as per the nature of the goods? So this is my question, sir.
Yeah, this is again a very fun general principle is, you don't determine the classification with reference to end use unless the end use, etc. is also specified in the heading, etc. Therefore, when you are asking whether it is, if the goods are described with reference to a function, then you look at the function. If the goods are described with reference to a particular material or a constituent, then notwithstanding where it will be used, you still look at it with reference to the particular thing. Therefore, it all depends on the class. That is why the general thing is, we apply all these rules. But apart from all these rules, in commodity classification, the fundamental principle is, these are all used in trade. Therefore, you will also get the normal meaning of what it is used in common trade parlance if you are not able to get from the tariff, either with reference to the contents or with reference to the end use. If you have both, then you go by what is the normal trade classification, or how is it understood by the people dealing in those goods. That becomes a very important principle, which also has been laid down in the Supreme Court. So in your case, if you can give me an example of what you have in mind when you talk about something is answering with reference to function, but maybe not answering with reference to description. But I'm saying, if we are talking about the description is there and the description is satisfied, notwithstanding that it may be used. That is why I'm saying, when you say nuts and bolts, you may be using the nuts and bolts in motor car, you may be using in a nuclear reactor, etc. But because they are parts in both cases, but because they are parts of general use, you don't bother about that they are being used in the nuclear reactor or used in a motor car, you still classify them as a thing. Therefore, in the parts, they are very specifically talking about how you should classify. Therefore, it all depends on the competing entries, and in the competing entries, if there is something with reference to function, then you may be able to do it with reference to function. If you are not doing it anything with reference to function, then it is a description, not how or what it is going to be used. It becomes very relevant. For example, you say a bumper, a plastic bumper of a motor car. Now it is made of plastic. So generally, an article of plastic, you will say it is 39. But it is used in a motor car. The function is to be in the motor car and to make like a shock absorber. When you are hitting on the front or back side, you are having the bumper. But because 8708 specifically covers bumpers for motor vehicles, so notwithstanding it is made of steel, it is made of plastic, or it is made of some other material, etc., you will still classify it under 8708. It's again, the description itself is saying bumper for motor cars as a part. Therefore, even though it is a plastic, you will still not under section 39. Therefore, you can have function and also specificity in the competing entries or more than two, whichever entries you are looking at. From there only you will be able to find out. The general thing is, for example, again, the Supreme Court has already held that all descriptions in the commodity classification of central excise, customs, HSN, etc., are based on trade usage or trade parlance and not in their scientific sense, unless the HSN or the tariff itself says in a particular case it is used in a scientific sense, then and only then we will have to go into the scientific sense. That's what they are talking about. Therefore, it all depends with reference to the nature of the goods, the nature of the competing entries to determine the best fit classification for that particular product.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Sir, I think we have taken up almost all the queries.
Yeah.
So we can end this session, sir, now?
Yeah, end this session, yes. Thank you very much, all of you, for giving me one more opportunity. I'll continue on some other day after discussing with the organizers and conclude the classification session. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir, for this very wonderful session. As Natarajan sir has put it, it was a cruise through the entire topic of classification. So to all the participants also, thank you for joining us today in a large number. And this session will be uploaded in our YouTube channel, that is Madras Tax Bar Chennai. I have shared the link in the chat box. You can have a look at it and you can subscribe to it and you can catch the session there. It will be uploaded soon. With regard to the part 2 of this session, it will be notified. The date will be notified through your same source by which you got your message today. We are not yet finalized on the date, but very soon we will try to keep it. So thank you very much once again for joining us. Stay safe and take care. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm ending the session now.